Greninja EX has been one of my favorite decks to play. I've been playing it ever since it released. I've posted a deck list on the channel about Greninja before, and if you're looking at the deck from that previous iteration, it's remained relatively the same, but I've trimmed a lot of the parts that I felt like were a little bit unnecessary. Like, I do believe I was running 2 Super Rods at one point and a double Turo, but I found that some of those pieces were just completely unnecessary, so I ended up cutting the Turo down to run a second boss's orders. I'm only running 2 Irida in exchange for having an Arven, which can fetch my 4 Sealstone or my TM Devolution. I also think that double TM Devolution is not the play in this format because we've gone against more Noctowl decks and more decks that are just less affected by TM Devolution, that you kind of only need 1 copy of this, if any at all. I'm also not running the Enhanced Hammer anymore. I don't think that Lugia is a matchup that's worth teching against, because 1, the Enhanced Hammer doesn't always mean you're going to win that matchup, and then 2, Lugia is already kind of hard anyways, because you 2-hit KO most of the things in the deck. Otherwise, you know, we've only had a few new inclusions. The Tera Orb is really nice, because it means that you can just go ahead and grab the Tera Orb off your Arven or your Irida, and then grab your Greninja that way. I've also thought about including a Feather Ball for that same exact reason, and cutting down one of the Ultra Balls for that. And lastly, and perhaps the most important card for the deck, is the Briar. This allows you to focus more on playing the disruptive game instead of trying to be a high-tempo, high-combo deck occasionally. So the Briar allows you to catch back up on surprises that you've lost, and allows you to close out games that would have otherwise been unclose-outable because your opponent got too far ahead. Oh, and there's also Fez in here, which is pretty good after you've completely disrupted your opponent with Unfair Stamp and you just drop 8 cards off the Fez and the Unfair Stamp. I think this deck is really flexible. There's a lot of ways to play it, but this is still my take on the deck. I still think it's the best way that you could be playing this deck, because the game plan is easy to execute, you have a solid flow, and honestly it's just the version of the deck that I'm the most acquainted with. So it's the one that I believe is the best because I have the most practice with it. And if you guys do enjoy the video, make sure to like, comment down below, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next. Getting started with the first match here, it's against a Miraidon, and yeah, obviously this is an easy matchup, but still, Miraidon can get off the ground pretty quickly, and they can end up swinging prizes, and because both I want to go first, my opponent wants to go second, it's just, matches is kind of interesting depending on how the opponent approaches it, so I'm just going to go ahead and try to get as much set up as possible. I think I actually already make a misplay. I do believe I should have probably set up a second Froakie. I see the Pikachu, and that's not a good sign, because either there's a Lost Box, and there's a chance I get hit by Kramer immediately, or this is Miraidon. And of course it's Miraidon, so this is not looking super phenomenal for me. So here we are, and I also attached a DT to the active. I definitely think I should have grabbed a second Froakie if I was given the chance to, but if my opponent doesn't hit the attack here, then we might be in an okay spot. And even if they do, I actually have tools still that can allow me to get back into the game. I'm getting this first KO onto my Froakie here, which is such a disaster. It means that I will have to try really hard in order to find a comeback in here. I'm just going to go ahead and set the Pidgey, since I know I'll have an access to free retreat here when I evolve the Pidgeot, as long as my Pidgeot is still in the deck, which it is. I also go ahead and discard the Arven here, because I only have 2 tools in the deck, being the Devolution and the 4 Sealstone, so the Arven's always going to be worse than the Irida here. I'm trying to figure out what I want to grab or what I want to do. And the option here is I basically just want to always Unfair Stamp my opponent here, because the only thing that's going to keep me in the game is if I slow down my opponent's curve. And I'm also just going to go ahead and set up a bunch of Greninjas here. Pretty much just steady my deck out as much as I possibly can. And I'm also going to go ahead and pop the Area 0 just to stop them from putting down even more Pokemon. So this could stop them from putting down like a Lumineon, for example, which I think can be decently strong. It does mean that they're just going to chuck a Miraidon, but that's perfectly fine with me. And I go ahead and search my deck again for even more cards, and I'm trying to figure out what the best combination of tools and supporters will be to get me out of this situation. But I'm just grabbing an energy to discard. I feel like I could have grabbed the Enhanced Hammer if I was going to go ahead and do that. But it's fine. It allows me to trim out just a few more cards out of the deck, yeah, energy in play, and the Cleffa is going to refresh my hand a bunch. It does mean that my opponent is going to be 2 pros ahead of me, which is pretty bad, but they're going to have to be playing around the Greninja the whole game. As long as I'm running disruption, such as Iono, for example, then they might struggle to come back from their hand sizes. But with the Fez and the Fleet-Footed, it's kind of hard to keep track of everything here. Thankfully, because the Greninja is a fighting type, it does mean I'm going to be hitting everything for weakness, including the Fez, and that can be really strong for me. I'm still trying to figure out like what I want to kill here, or how to sequence even the rest of my actions. I'm also hoping that I get a Collapsed Stadium so I can just take out the Rotom. That way my opponent can't just go kill Pidgeot and kill the Rotom. So we'll have to see off of that. I am going to end up probably putting the Fez down, which doesn't really help my case. And my opponent's also going to pop this Magneton for 1, which can help me because it means that it can turn my Briar on in some situations. I also even hit the Collapse here, which is, you know, exactly what I was asking for, right? And they're also just going to go ahead and take out the Cleffa. Unfortunately, they can't find that last energy they want for the Iron Hands here, which is great because it means I can keep going. The Fez is going to come down, and I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do. My opponent doesn't have very many cards in their hand right now, and they've only taken 2 prizes, so I'm just going to go ahead and not even Iono them this turn. I'm still trying to figure out like what else I want to do, since I have the Pidgeot Quick Search still available to me. I'm also going to go ahead and pop what I think is the Zapdos. I know they've already popped a Magneton, but I don't know if my opponent runs like a Grass or a Metal Energy for their Pikachu or another way to set it up, but I really don't want my Pikachu game fully blasted. And it can also fix the numbers with like a Raichu in play. So Raichu will have to discard 5 energies with a Zapdos in play, and that'll no longer be the case. I'm also choosing to take out the Pikachu here instead of something else, which is maybe not the best play available to me, but I'm choosing to do this because I don't want them to have access to Area 0, and possibly a bunch of other tools for dumping all this other stuff. That said, killing the Fez is definitely like an optional line, and so is killing the Raikou, because both of these Pokemon like pose a serious threat to my opponent. But I really just like don't want my opponent to get a max field out and do things like start using what's his name? Start using like MEW EX, for example, or putting out Radiant Greninja and all this other stuff that I feel like my opponent can use to draw out of a situation. I also have the Briar in my hand right now, which is so good for me, because as long as they don't end up taking 4 prizes somehow, and they just end up taking 2 here, then it's great for me. If they end up taking 1 prize, then it's very unlikely that they'll even be able to close out the game before I can, because all I have to do is send 1 more Greninja, which I can very easily do, and just sweep from there. The most I'd be scared of is like Iron Hands having enough damage modifiers to kill my Pidgeot all at once, but like I said, seems like a not so great situation for me. Opponent is just going to go ahead and send the Iron Hands, and they're really not just respecting the Briar play here, which then, you know, is just going to allow me to win the game, because all I have to do is send Greninja, click Briar, and then win. It's as solid as that. And then, yeah, we get the search to deck, BM, whatever. I just grabbed the most recent card because I didn't actually mean to do that. And, yeah, that's really great because Briar allows you to pick up on some of these aggressive matchups and flip the tables against them. So something like against a Terrapagos or a Roaring Moon, for example. This Briar is just really good at flipping the tables against them if they've taken 1 prize or, you know, all this other stuff. And this matchup is against Regidrago, which I believe I actually get to go first, which is very nice. But I do start the Fez, which is a little sad. This is before I put the Switch in. I believe it's still an Enhanced Hammer, which at this point, I would definitely say you shouldn't be running that card. I don't think there's enough Lugia to justify it. And the other decks, like Enhanced Hammer doesn't really affect it. Sometimes it can affect a Lugia, like you turn off a Gift Energy or Legacy Energy, which can be nice. But it's just like, it's just for Lugia, which is already kind of like a bad matchup. And it's not even like that popular enough that I think it's worth running the tech for it. So I just kind of don't bother with it. My opponent ends up going pretty crazy on the setup here. And by pretty crazy, I mean they don't have any Underpwn setup. It doesn't mean that they can't attack, but it does mean that their setup is more contingent on them hitting some crazy cards next turn. That said, they still have not played a support yet, so they could have a support in their hand. And I'm just going ahead and thinking about what to grab here. I think I'm just going to set up an extra Froakie and a Manaphy here, because I can't do anything regardless, so I'd much rather just have the, what's it called? I'd much rather just have the extra setup with the Frogadier instead of trying to churn out a Greninja this turn and taking it nice and slow. Other than that, one thing I haven't seen from my opponent's discard yet is the Kyurem, which is very nice for me because it just means that like I don't have to worry about Kyurem yet, even the Manaphy in play. And so it can force them to, you know, have to beg for like Canceling Cologne, Prime Catcher, Kyurem, all that other stuff. Also, it does seem that my opponent is able to hit their combo here, which is a little sad because it does mean that I'm likely to lose the Fez this turn, or, you know, just other bad things happen to me. Or, if they don't kill it, there's a chance I could Turo it up and remove all their damage from play. So we'll just have to see, like, what happens first, right? I also don't think they have the guaranteed V-Star in the discard already. I'm pretty sure I checked already, but I'm pretty sure it's like Gudra, Dragapult. I think there's one more target in there, but I don't quite recall. My opponent's also just got to spread a little bit of damage. And they're just putting 1 damage onto the Manaphy here, and then 5 onto the Greninja, or onto the Frogadier. I'm not entirely sure what that does for my opponent, but yeah. I also am like sketched out because like, I really want a lot of things here. So I ended up taking the Irida instead. That way I can just grab another Pokemon. And the Arven could be okay for just grabbing like my Forest Seal Stone. It could be access like Forest Seal Stone stuff, but I really like don't have anything else I really want to set up here. And I'd rather just get the extra Pokemon out of my deck because I know that can instantly like put me in a situation it's like, oh well, they're not gonna like double KO or something, right? Not that I think it's entirely feasible for my opponent, but it just like gives me an extra layer of safety. It can also give me access to like Collapse later, so I can put down like a Rotom, use the Forest Seal Stone, and then collapse it away immediately after. And so having more Pokemon on my bench is like not a bad thing in this situation. I believe I just grabbed the Unfair Stamp because I'm trying my best to just immediately break my opponent. I don't want my opponent to have a chance to get set up here. And so the Unfair Stamp is really powerful in that sense. And most of my game plan against all my opponents is trying to hit them with Unfair Stamp as soon as possible, and then use Greninja's phenomenal search and card draw to kind of win the game from there. So if I use like, you know, Mirage immediately after Unfair Stamp, I can then Devo, or I could just kill something and step even further. So I feel like Greninja just leads really well into deleting a lot of my opponent's setup. As my opponent's going to be choosing an action, they actually choose to knock out the Greninja in the active, which is going to force me to reset a bunch of stuff. Not the decision I thought they were going to make. I still thought they were going to take out the Fez, but, you know, this works with me. I'm going to go ahead and Night Stretcher the Water Energy. That way I can get some immediate value out of it. And I'm also going to go ahead and Ultra Ball, grab the Greninja. I'm not sure if this is the right play, because it does mean that I don't really get the option to see what I have after the Unfair Stamp. Like I said earlier, I'd really love to hit a Tera off of this. I also have Counter Catcher in my hand, and I do believe, in retrospect, I should have maybe Counter Catchered the Regidrago V and attacked it. But, you know, it's fun. I do save the Fez for post Unfair Stamp, so I have more tools to use, and I end up just using it to heal, or I end up getting the Turo and use it to fully heal off the Fez, resetting a lot of my opponent's progress, which I think is huge. Also grab the Pal Pad, so it can be immediately used to possibly put the Turo back into my deck, and, you know, just save out on giving my opponent prizes and all this other stuff. I do think that the set Regidrago is like an even-ish matchup. It's very hard because like your opponent has to combo a bunch of this stuff together, and then they also have to make a bunch of right decisions afterwards. But Greninja's a deck entirely about making like game-breaking decisions, because once your Shinobi Blade turn is over, and you have to set yourself up for the following turn. But you also don't want to lose to Iono and all that stuff. That said, it's kind of good that like Iono's on a downtrend because of Fez's existence. A lot of people aren't trying to play the gameplay that I'm playing my Greninja deck just because they're like, okay, well, Fez can break me out of this situation for the most part, or I can use a Mew EX to draw, and all these other things. So, and then Lugia just like doesn't care about hand disruption all that much once they get set up. So it's like a uphill battle, but I do believe they're going to be playing like this hand control type of disruption deck. Greninja is one of the like best ways to do it because it's so fast paced at what it does, being able to take 2 shots against mainly everything in the format, but it's also just great for all the other reasons, such as being able to cripple your opponent's backline with Mirage Barrage before they can even set up, and just having the option to search out 2 cards every turn with Quick Search Pidgeot and Shinobi Blade, which is so strong. Everything just comboing together in order to slow down the opponent as much as possible is great. I do wish there was a way to like fit like Crushing Hammer into the deck, because I think Crushing Hammer could be really strong, but it's only strong in like mass quantities, right? Which is the unfortunate part. My opponent is going to go ahead and finally attack, and I'm looking at my opponent's, what's it called? I'm looking at my opponent's deck area right here, trying to see if I can Iono them. Unfortunately, they're like 1 card above from me being able to do that, and so, I'm going to go ahead, grab my Rotom here, take it out of the deck, because at this point, the Rotom is like not really a liability, just because like it's so easy to get value off it with the Forest Seal Stone or whatever, right? I mean, my opponent just has a bunch of ways of killing stuff. And I also lose my Collapsed Stadium here, which kind of sucks because it then means that I can't like pop something out of here, but I'll live. We're going to take this moment to try to set up another Greninja, I believe. So I could go ahead, use this Forest Seal Stone, and just pop it. I'm also taking out the Fez, mostly just because it's like, oh, I can deal with it. And Ursaluna could kill something else on the following turn, which is great. I'm just going to go ahead and retreat, go to this, Rare Candy up, and yeah. So yeah, my gameplay is just like, kill the Fez. My opponent will struggle to take another knockout against me, and then I can win the game by bossing up something, kill it with Bear. And the reason I need to move the Greninja out of the active is once again for that Kyurem. Because Greninja is a Tera Pokemon, it is safe on the bench from snipe attacks. So one way my opponent can win here is by killing the Froakie and the Greninja in the active with the use of Kyurem. It would require them to have a bunch of tools or a bunch of cards in their hand. It requires them to have like a Prime Catcher, which I believe my opponent should still have because I haven't used it yet. Though they could have a different A-spec like a Mixer. I've seen Mixer being played in some of these Regidrago decks. And then they also have to find a way to discard the Kyurem, and we haven't seen it hit the discard, so my thought is that it's been prized, and if that's the case, my opponent might really struggle to get it into the discard here. They're probably just going to pull up my Greninja. Like I said, it seems like the most reasonable play. And, it's so sketchy because it's relying on my opponent to, like, not prize something, but I rip the Pokestop and hit the Collapse, so I don't really get the option here to do something else. That said, I do think my opponent could have possibly set up with Mew at some point during the game, because Mew could attack me and use Shinobi Blade for itself, but it would hit me for weakness, which would knock me out. I think it's something that some Regidrago players forget about, is that the Mew can also be attacker. In this matchup, it's so strong against my opponent. But alas, they don't have a way to discard Kyurem from their hand if they even have it, and I just go ahead and boss up the Mew and knock it out with my Gachikuma, taking my 2 prizes and winning the set. Finally, this last game is against a friend of mine. His name is Squish. I usually play it very often. He's usually playing Greninja or some other like off-brand deck. So he wanted to do a testing match with me, and I needed one more match to record for gameplay. So we're gonna see a Greninja mirror. It might even give you like a taste of like what other things you can do with the deck. Because as I talked about with the deck intro, I think Greninja as an archetype is extremely flexible, and you do a lot of things with it. I also go ahead and attach a DTA to my active. Now, against most decks, I think this is a very reasonable assumption, because there's not a lot of Duskull decks that can attack you turn 1 in the format, but I specifically know my friend over here is playing Rotom Fan and has both a Jet Energy and a Switches deck, so all he would need to do is get a supporter. And that can be scary. I'd rather put the DTE on the active though, and try to get ahead in the game as possible. If they manage to stuff me out by killing the Froakie, then I'm not too sad because I still have the Water Energy in my hand, which I can capitalize off of, and then we lose it with Iono, but details. Thankfully we have gained it back. My opponent is trying to see if there's a way that they can get a switch and attack off with the Rotom, but I do believe he tells me that he's missing the stadium, which is pretty swag of me. I'm also going to go ahead and use the Forest Seal Stone to go ahead and pull out just another Pokemon. I'm going to pull up my Manaphy here to try and force him to Duskull Bomb it. And it also allows me to set up the Collapsed Stadium, pop my Rotom off the field since I no longer need it. Also limits my opponent's bench just a little bit, reducing the damage that they can do with Terrapagos, which is fine by me. I also discard the Iono, which I'm not sure like what the proper discard here is, but I'm thinking that I definitely want the boss in my hand, so I can take 2 prizes against Terrapagos, because if that is the case, then later down the line I can Barrage 2 Noctowns and win the game. So I decided like the Eri might be better for taking out like a Rare Candy, for example, and that could, once again, stuff my opponent's setup from getting out like a Pidgeot or a Greninja. But we get bossed at the bottom of the deck. My opponent also puts the Terrapagos in the active, which is very, very ambitious. I don't think this is the correct line you're supposed to take, just simply because you don't have a lot to work off of. But also, like, maybe he's trying to play optimistically. Unfortunately, he is just going to kind of get destroyed here. I get rid of the counter catcher because I simply don't need it. And I think there's an argument that I should have possibly grabbed the Pidgeot off that Ultra Ball. That way, this card could have been like Irida, for example, and then I could Irida for a Frogadier, and then a Rare Candy to evolve my Pidgeot. Now I'm kind of struggling because I think I made a bad decision here. I'm just going to go ahead and grab the Pidgeot now. That way, I don't have a good reason why, actually. I think it's just so I can grab a Rare Candy off my next attack. So, I'm still playing off the fact that maybe my opponent can get a knockout here onto my Greninja. Possibly like an Ursaluna, for example. And so, I don't know. Essentially, I just have double Greninja set up, and so I'm not too worried about what my opponent can have. I definitely think like the proper line prior to this though was grab Pidgey off the Ultra Ball and then Shinobi Blade for a Rare Candy, or not the Rare Candy, but the Irida. So I could just grab Frog and Rare Candy off of that and then proceed to the rest of the game. But because I made some slightly bad decisions, now the rest of my game is a little bit scuffed. This is fine though, because I can just go ahead and grab the Rare Candy now. If he doesn't boss me, or if he doesn't Iono me, then I get to quick search for Pidgeot, and then go ahead and just boss up this Greninja for game. Or if he Ionos me, my bosses are still in the deck, so there's still a chance that I could just draw into it naturally. And even then, like, he's still on the timer, so I think this out is my best way for proceeding with the game, despite having the scuffed setup previously. And the fact that I have double Greninja is super nice for me. He ends up using Counter Catcher to try to stall me out, and I don't believe he actually takes the knockout here. I believe he's just trying to play passive, which, perfectly fine. He also thwarts out the Duskull, which is one of those ways that I was thinking that he could possibly knock me out, but, I'm just going to go ahead and attach and retreat and knock him out and take a clean 6-0 prize game here. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys later.